Now we turn to an author just recently published with Sync Book Press, the author of the Yogic Gospel of Thomas, Swami Anantananda Giri.
Hi, my name is Swami Anantananda Giri. I am going to tell you today who I am, what I do, and how that can help you if you would like it to. And I'm going to try to do that in about 20 minutes. So I'm going to cover a lot of ground and do my best to do it pretty quickly. So the presentation that I've come up with, I decided to call Enlightenment, Mushrooms, Shaktipat, and the Yogic Gospel of Thomas. My journey starts with a vision quest of sorts at Cape Flattery, Washington, the northwesternmost point of the contiguous United States. And it's a place that was special to me. I went there and I ritually ingested psilocybin with the goal of experiencing enlightenment, and it happened, although it wasn't exactly in the way that I had expected it to after analyzing the experience for a few years. I finally feel comfortable saying that definitively. That's the Native American, the Buddha-faced Native American Indian chief that I saw there. You can probably see from the outline where I would get the idea, but this was a living deity. When I looked up from my list of intentions and started to observe my surroundings, it was very much alive. You can't really see the whole thing, but there's a headdress of old growth, I think cedar trees, exploding from his head like an illumined crown chakra. And when the experience really set in, it was really awe-inspiring. And then I started to kind of shift my attention and kind of explore what was going on around me. I was sitting on the edge of a cliff. Basically, the feeling was that my heart was overflowing with love. I saw the self in all and all in the self. That's a technical description of the enlightened perspective. In retrospect, I reminded myself a lot of Double Rainbow Guy here, so I'm going to play it a little bit.
Whoa, that's a full rainbow all the way. Double rainbow. Oh my god. It's a double rainbow all the way. Whoa, that's so intense. Whoa, man. Wow.
I really like
Whoa.
Double Rainbow Guy, so.
Whoa. Whoa! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Woo! Oh! Wow! Woo!
And it goes on like that for about 3 minutes. And it's great. It's interesting to note that Double Rainbow Guy, when he talks about his experiences on YouTube, he's careful to point out that he was not under any sort of intoxicant or anything like that, but I'll get back to that in a moment. So before this, the birth of my oldest child had been the deepest that I had really experienced a sense of love ever. And so that was kind of the benchmark up until this point. When I had this experience, it was like I was immersed in the ocean of love that even the love of a father for his child is like a droplet of. It's the best analogy I've got. But it was profound. It kind of took over my life. The scriptures call it God, they call it divine love, they call it consciousness absolute. It's beyond the sphere of mental constructs. And I literally sat on that cliff overlooking the ocean for about 3 hours. I literally cried and smiled and cried for the entire time. And people have asked me various questions to the effect of, was this real, or was it just a chemical-induced hallucination? I don't really like the term hallucinogens personally. To me, it felt really real again. Double Rainbow guy had a similar category of experience, and he wasn't on drugs. You know, it's just, and I haven't been able to replicate the experience using those methods, but I have been able to relive that. It's occurred spontaneously as a result of meditative and yogic practices, because that's another path that I was exploring simultaneously, and that's just kind of where my path led me, I guess. When I came down from the mushrooms, I was super depressed because I was like, no, I want to be here forever, because it was literally the best thing that had ever happened to me. I want to talk about some specific things that were the result of that experience. So we can say, for argument's sake, that it wasn't real. If we're arguing with a person who is, you know, that's their mindset, they don't want to be swayed, okay, whatever. But there were very practical outcomes that came from that. I saw that everything was myself. That was my experience at that time. And I saw that this was the embodiment of perfection, and I was literally in love with everything. And at the same time all this was going on, my mind went to people who had wronged me. I had been holding on to a lot of grudges and hatred. I was in a pretty dark place at the time, and just seeing things in that light just kind of caused that all to disperse without really any conscious effort on my part. It was just kind of a shift in perspective. Basically, I let go of something toxic and became happy instead. And I mean, who doesn't want to be happy? I feel crazy talking about this stuff a lot of the time, but just because I feel like most of the time people don't really have any frame of reference for what I'm talking about, and I feel that what I have to say about it is really, really inadequate. But if that's the alternative, isn't really an option for me. I don't want to go back to looking at things the way that I did before that experience. I turned to scriptures to kind of explain the experience, and I was dipping my toes in a lot of different experiences at the time. I wound up in the yogic tradition, and those scriptures, and scriptures from other traditions too, like Chinese and Hermetic, at least some of those also emphasize the need for a guru or a guide. And so I made up my mind that I was going to take a guru. This is the guru I found, His Holiness Maha Mandaleshwar Paramahamsa Swarupananda Vishwaguru Maharaj. He happens to be a Hindu monk, a Swami, and so that is how I came to be associated with this tradition and to be a Swami, become a Swami myself. Traditionally, well, I should say our tradition specifically, which is Kashmir Shaivism, refers to consciousness as Shiva. Shiva is basically the recognition of that oneness that during that experience that I described somewhat just now. It's that oneness that I was perceiving, that I was identifying myself with. Shiva is one's own essential nature according to the philosophy. The guru is immersed in the direct experience of this constantly. And this tradition is a Shaktipat tradition. The Guru Shakti is the power to impart this awareness to the disciple or the seeker. And Shaktipat literally means the transmission of grace, the transmission of this power to impart that awareness. And on the Guru path, one becomes his or her guru, which is also the self. So the guru is the self, and it's not a different self, it's the self with a capital S. So it's the same self as myself or yourself. It's the essence that everything that exists in manifest form comes from. So that's just an interesting side note that I wanted to tie into Shaktipat. On the Guru path, one becomes his or her guru, upon realizing that they're the self with a capital S, after I received Shaktipat, I started having dreams, and the contents of them were autobiographical, or not autobiographical data, they were biographical data about my guru, things that I shouldn't have known because I hadn't met him in person at the time. I received Shaktipat at a distance from another Swami, the Swami that introduced me to him, who was acting on his behalf. So my really concise summary on Shaktipat is that Shaktipat is magic. It's magic for the highest motive possible, initiating the remembrance of one's own true nature as Shiva. And in my experience, I have to say that it works. At least I'm highly slanted toward that opinion. Like I said earlier, at my guru's insistence, I was made a Swami. I didn't really know what a Swami was when I came into this. Never really had any desire to be a Swami, but that's where I'm at. That's what I'm doing. Backtracking a bit, I had this profound experience. It was a life. It was a world-shattering epiphany. It completely blew my mind, and so my first reaction was to shout it from the rooftops and spread the good news. And I thought people would want to hear that, and I found that the reaction of most people that I had been surrounded by at the time was something along the lines of, "What the hell is wrong with Brandon?" But I didn't let it discourage me too much. I just became a little more selective about where I talk about certain things. But my mom listened to me when I suggested that she start practicing meditation to relieve anxiety and depression that she was experiencing. And she reported back that it was helping in all of these incredible ways. She was able to just be functional in social situations that she wasn't able to prior to that. And a lot of other things, a lot of specific things are kind of personal, so I won't really get into them. But at the same time, she had this question. Well, let me preface that by saying that I grew up going to the local Nazarene church. It's a Protestant denomination, and I went with my mom about 2 or 3 times a week. I was a very devout little Christian boy, and not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but there was some programming that happened in the process of that whole immersion in that culture. And so my mom had the question, after doing this yogic practice, she wanted to know if she was going to hell. She was dealing with a lot of guilt. So I started writing the Yogic Gospel of Thomas. It was published by Syncbook Press about 6 months ago. In January of 2014, it was completed with help from Alan Abadessa Green and Jason Barrera. I think it really, well, I'll just stick to my cards here, or else I'll go on a tangent. It basically compared the philosophy of the early Christian Gospel of Thomas and the works that are cited therein to the philosophy of non-duality of various Indian traditions. And I think that we sufficiently proved that Christianity was derived, at least in part, from various Indian schools of philosophy, these schools of non-duality. In the process, I even identified elements that I believe were the prototype to the Indian tradition that I belong to, which is Kashmir Shaivism, the Shiva-centric philosophy of the Kashmir region of India that developed sometime around the 9th century AD. So the book also goes on to discuss the possibility of Jesus having studied extensively in India, how details of the accounts of his life line up with the philosophy underlying the traditional sayings attributed to Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. And finally, the book details how one can undertake the practices offered both by early Christianity attributed to Jesus and by the esoteric tradition that I represent today. I think we held ourselves to a pretty high standard writing the book. We worked really hard to to keep the work up to that standard. We're going to do a group meditation for anybody who would like to participate. We're going to meditate on the mantra Om Namah Shivaya. It's the initiatory mantra of my lineage. It carries the Shakti of the lineage that is said to go back to the very first manifestation of Shiva on earth, or I should say in human form for the sake of humans. It's an ancient tantric tradition. It used to be very, very secretive. The Shaktipat thing, it's the main reason for that, according to Swami Muktananda, my guru's guru, is that it's so simple that people just can't believe that it actually works sometimes. But I invite you to give it a try. I'll also be going around for anybody who is interested in receiving a direct experience of the Shakti of the lineage. I've been authorized by my guru to bestow the Shakti. It's not it's the Guru Shakti. I'm not claiming any powers of divinity or anything right now, but I've been empowered by him for this energy to flow through me. So I'm going to go around, and while you guys are meditating, I suggest you do it with your eyes closed. I'll just touch you on the shoulder. If you object, then I'd like you to just raise your hand. Say, I don't want you to touch me on the forehead, if that's the case, and then I won't do that. If you don't do that, then I'll assume that you don't mind, and I'll give you Shaktipat, and I'll be interested in hearing the experiences of anybody who would like to share them. So what you're going to want to do is sit with your spine straight, close your eyes. You're going to meditate on the mantra Om Namah Shivaya. This should be recited internally, mentally, once on the in-breath and once on the out-breath. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. If your mind wanders, probably will, because that's what the mind tends to do. It's not a big deal. It's part of the gig. Just gently redirect your attention to the mantra. That's your centering technique. Meditation is the practice of going back to that centering technique.